If you've noticed long delays on the Piccadilly line of late, there is good reason. Why? Well, half the trains are out of use because the change of season from autumn to winter is causing problems with leaves on the line. Yes, that problem. The solution? Well, according to the RMT, is to close the line altogether to sort it out as quickly as possible. Simon Harris now on why TfL disagrees.
It's known as a flat, but this graze on the wheel of a tube train spells chaos for tens of thousands of commuters and could be lethal. Half of the train fleet on the Piccadilly line is out of action because the wheels keep developing flats. The damage is caused by wet leaves being crushed under the wheels when the train brakes, and it happened this time last year as well.
We can predict it to a degree, but when you get a combination of factors happening in terms of moisture, in terms of leaf drop, and in terms of the temperature, as we had at the back end of last week.
It's called autumn, it's cold, it's wet, the leaves come off the trees.
Indeed, it is.
The problem is unique to the Piccadilly line because the trains are more than 40 years old and don't have the rail equivalent of anti-skid braking. The solution is to grind the wheels on a lathe to make them round again, or to fit the trains with new wheels. Fixing the problem isn't quick. Each Piccadilly line train has 48 wheels. It takes 2 days to check them and replace or repair the damaged wheels. Parts of the Piccadilly line are now reduced to a shuttle service. Passengers are facing long gaps between trains.
It just takes too long to get home. We want to get home. We've had a long day at work and now we just want to get home and we can't, so now we're going to walk to King's Cross.
The only reports I've got is obviously lack of trains, and I can't understand why all of a sudden there are a lack of trains.
I've been walking and just standing and waiting. It's terrible.
One rail union suggested the line should be shut completely to allow the entire fleet of 86 trains to be checked and repaired.
All RMT members are telling us this is a major problem. We need to get this bottomed out urgently.
But a shutdown was rejected by London Underground and the capital's transport watchdog.
The Piccadilly line is a really strategic link in London's transport network. It takes people right through the centre of London, but also into Heathrow. So actually closing it for a period of time to deal with this problem, I don't think is a realistic option.
The maintenance depot in Northfield is now working 24-hour shifts. Wheels are also being sent to other workshops to be repaired. When the same thing happened last year, London Underground promised a review to see if it should have been better prepared. Now it's warning this year's disruption could last a few more weeks until all the leaves have gone.
Goodness, what a year. It's really not a good time to be a commuter in London, is it?
The commuting's stressful enough at the best of times, but the Piccadilly line really is in a league of its own. Literally a case of the wheels coming off, as we saw there. And I'm told that the problem's been compounded by the fact that there are huge crowds using the Piccadilly line from Winter Wonderland at Hyde Park. Now, next week, it could be even worse because RMT drivers on the Piccadilly line, along with their colleagues on the Hammersmith and City, are due to stage a strike to coincide with action by guards on Southern Railways. And today we learned that members of the drivers' union ASLEF, who also work for Southern, have voted overwhelmingly to strike in that same dispute over driver-only operated trains. ASLEF has yet to make a decision on if and when it will call those strikes, but if they're on the same day as the RMT action, it's going to be chaos.
Simon, thank you. London's football clubs were today asked to dig into their deep pockets and pay for the policing at their grounds. Keeping fans safe cost taxpayers £5 million during the last season. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is with me now. That sounds like an incredible lot of money.
Well, according to the Mayor's office, if the club stumped up the full cost of £5 million, it would be enough to hire another 93 police officers in London. The whole question of policing at football match has been in the spotlight recently following trouble at West Ham's new home ground, the Olympic Stadium. On average, there are now 136 police officers on duty for each home game at that ground. Last season, before the move to the new ground, West Ham paid just £45,000 to the police. Millwall and Leyton Orient paid absolutely nothing. We don't know the figures for this season yet, but the London Assembly and members of the London Assembly say it's just not acceptable.
Football clubs can pay tens of millions of pounds in transfer fees, yet don't seem to be able to find the £5 million across all the clubs. You know, there's a small change down the back of the sofa for them compared to the wages of the Premier League players to pay for the 93 police officers that equates to across London.
So the key question, will the clubs pay up?
I don't think it's very likely. Following a High Court ruling in 2012, Scotland Yard can only bill the clubs for the cost of policing inside the grounds and inside the stadium, not in surrounding streets where a big police presence is often very necessary. That's why the clubs prefer to have stewards inside the stadium, not police officers, because it's a lot cheaper. Tomorrow, officials from the Legacy Corporation, which owns the Olympic Stadium, will be questioned by London Assembly members about whether policing and stewarding arrangements are efficient and good enough.
All right, Simon, thank you.
Now, this weekend's X Factor semi-final is going to be an emotional farewell, not for the latest act to follow Honey G in being booted off the show, but for the employees at Wembley's Fountain Studios. For Sunday's results show will be its last ever broadcast. At its peak, Fountain made some of the nation's most loved shows, including On the Buses and Upstairs Downstairs. Now, though, it'll be turned into flats, as Simon Harris reports.
In 24 hours' time, their performance needs to be flawless. Wannabe boy band 5 After Midnight spent much of today rehearsing for tomorrow's X Factor semi-final. It's the climax of the series, but also the end of an era, because on Sunday the lights will go out for the last time. The Wembley studios are closing to make way for homes. For the production team, it'll be a moment of sadness, and for host Dermot O'Leary, especially poignant. This is where he did his screen test.
I understand there has to be housing, especially affordable housing. But there's a huge lack of it. But at the same time, A, this place supports jobs, so economically it's a shame it's going. But B, there is a sense of history. If it looked more beautiful, it's the sort of place that could be listed.
Slightly shabby and unloved, it was never going to win an award for architecture. But producers love this place because it's Britain's biggest TV studio. These buildings began life as film studios, making silent movies in the 1920s. But it was the arrival of ITV in 1955 which turned the site into a powerhouse of popular entertainment. The studios gave birth to some of the best-loved TV programmes of the 60s and 70s. On the Buses, a sitcom based on the lives of bus workers. And at the other end of the social scale, Upstairs Downstairs, the Downton Abbey of its day.
The idea of a rickety old building being pulled down and some nice new homes for people being built is good. Maybe they'll call the block of flats Upstairs Downstairs, and maybe there'll be some ghosts of Hudson and Mrs. Bridges, and maybe even me roaming about.
For the last 19 years, the studios have been home to talent shows, Pop Idol, Britain's Got Talent and X Factor. This year's series gave us Honey G, North London born and bred, and a local favourite with the studio audience.
That's a super thing about here, is the audiences we get, and the fact, I suppose, because we're in Wembley and it's, you're in amongst a huge swathe of public that want to come and see the shows, and they're all fans. The atmosphere in the studio is fantastic, which you wouldn't get at some other studio locations I could think of.
This is our last weekend here, so we've got 2 big shows, and we'll go out with a bang. Not literally. That happens, I think, in a couple of weeks' time when they bring in the Wrecking Ball. But yeah, 2 huge shows, and it's going to be a really strange feeling on Sunday night, I think, when we finally switch off the lights.
Next year, X Factor will move to a new home in Acton, but at Wembley, 60 years of television history is drawing to a close. Simon Harris, ITV News, Wembley.